Beneath the fractured moon, a metallic leaf unfurled its veins, spilling golden light like the last sigh of a dying sun. Lyrian Ashbloom stumbled through the iron woods, her bare feet slicing against roots that twisted like rusted blades from the frozen earth. The air bit with the tang of iron and frost, a metallic chill that seeped into her bones, mocking the warmth her fey blood once commanded. At 118 years, she carried the lithe grace of 25 summers, but now that illusion cracked like thin ice under a predator's paw. Her wings, those iridescent sails of silver and emerald, lay severed behind her, discarded in the underbrush where her pursuers had hacked them free. The pain was a distant roar, numbed by the venom they'd injected, a poison that clawed at her magic, unraveling it thread by thread until only whispers remained. She had fled the court of eternal thorns, the glittering spires of her homeland where alliances were forged in blood and betrayal. Refusing to be bartered like a trinket to seal a pact with the Shadow Realms, she had invoked the ancient right of exile. But the High Fae did not grant mercy. They hunted. "Traitor's wings for a traitor's flight," her sister had sneered, the blade descending as the council watched with eyes like polished obsidian. Now, the Iron Woods claimed her as their own, a borderland cursed by both Fae and Wolf, where trees grew not from soil, but from the bones of forgotten wars, their bark sharp as daggers, leaves glinting like forged steel under the lunar glow. The wind howled through the canopy, carrying the distant clamor of hooves and the snap of enchanted vines. Lyrian's breath came in ragged bursts, fogging the air before her. She clutched the metallic leaf in her fist, its edges cutting into her palm, warm blood mingling with the golden luminescence that pulsed faintly against her skin. It was no ordinary foliage. Born from the heart of the summer tree in the court's hidden groves, it held the essence of renewal, a secret she'd guarded since her youth. But tonight, it felt like a curse, its light a beacon drawing the hunters closer. Why had she taken it? A fool's defiance, or the pull of some deeper fate? The Deuce's threads, they called it in the old songs, fate woven under the moon's unblinking eye. Her legs buckled as she crested a ridge of jagged stone, the woods opening to a frozen hollow where moonlight pooled like spilled mercury. Snow dusted the ground here, unnatural in these iron-veined wilds, carried on winds from the northern packs. Lyrian collapsed against a trunk, its bark drawing fresh blood from her shoulder where thorns had torn her gown. The fabric, once woven from spider silk and starlight, hung in tatters, exposing the pale curves of her body to the relentless cold. She was an omega in the old tongue, not of wolves, but of Fae lineage, born to soothe, to bind, to yield. Yet yielding had brought her here, to this brink of oblivion. Voices echoed now, sharp and triumphant. The traitor's scent fades, but the light betrays her. A Fae hunter, his armor etched with thorn motifs, crested the opposite ridge, bow drawn. Beside him, two more, their eyes gleaming with the feral hunger of those who served the court without question. They were the Iron Guard, enforcers of balance through brutality, their magic amplified by the wood's metallic heart. Lyrian pressed the leaf to her chest, willing its glow to dim, but it only flared brighter, as if feeding on her desperation. Her own power flickered, a faint warmth in her veins, enough to summon an illusion of mist, but not to flee. She rose, back to the tree, the wind whipping her auburn hair across her face. The hunters advanced, boots crunching through the snow-dusted iron shards that littered the ground. The leader, a tall figure with skin like burnished copper, knocked an arrow tipped with black iron. Lyrian Ashbloom, by the Thorn Queen's decree, your exile ends in blood. The seed you stole will return to the court, and your wings will adorn the gates as warning. The seed, they knew. Panic surged, hot and metallic in her throat. The metallic leaf was its vessel, a fragment harboring the semente do verão eterno, a power to thaw eternal winters, to shift the realm's fragile equilibrium. She'd meant to destroy it, to deny the court its weapon of domination. But now it doomed her. The arrow loosed, whistling through the air. Lyrian twisted, the shaft grazing her arm, drawing a line of fire. She gasped, tasting blood on her lips, her own or the leaf's golden ichor. The hunters closed in, vines uncoiling from their gauntlets like living whips. One lashed out, wrapping her ankle, yanking her to her knees. The cold earth met her skin, needles of frost piercing her resolve. "Mercy," she whispered, though she knew the word was ash in this place. Mercy was for the strong, not the rejected. As the leader raised his blade, moonlight catching its edge in a silver arc, a low growl rumbled from the shadows beyond the hollow. Not Fae, not wind. This was deeper, primal, echoing with the weight of ancient oaths. The hunters froze, bows turning toward the tree line where eyes, amber and unyielding, gleamed through the iron lace of branches. Lyrian's heart stuttered, a strange pull tugging at her core, instinctive and forbidden. Wolf, alpha. The pact between their kinds shattered long ago, yet here, in the bleeding heart of the woods, boundaries blurred under the moon's indifferent gaze. The growl swelled to a howl, shattering the night, and the shadows erupted into motion. The shadows coalesced into fury, a blur of midnight fur and gleaming fangs bursting from the iron-laced tree line. The lead hunter's blade halted mid-air, his copper skin paling as the beast, massive, rippling with muscle honed by endless hunts, leaped into the hollow. Snow scattered like shattered glass under its paws, the air thickening with the musk of wild earth and something sharper, like storm-torn pine. Lyrian's breath caught, her body frozen not by cold, but by the primal thunder in her veins, a resonance she hadn't felt since the court's veiled rituals. This was no mere wolf. It was alpha essence, raw and commanding, pulling at the frayed edges of her fey soul. The creature struck the first hunter with surgical savagery, jaws clamping around the arm that wielded the vine whip. Bone cracked like dry branches in a gale, the fey's scream piercing the night as blood, crimson, not golden, sprayed across the frost-kissed ground. The other two whirled, arrows flying wild into the dark, but the wolf was a tempest, dodging with liquid grace before slamming into the second assailant. Claws raked through enchanted armor, tearing it asunder, exposing flesh to the merciless bite of iron shards beneath. The third hunter backed away, summoning thorns from the earth in a desperate coil, but the beast's amber eyes locked on him, unblinking, and he faltered, the magic crumbling like ash. Lyrian scrambled back against the tree, her wounded arm throbbing, the metallic leaf pulsing hot in her grip. Fear coiled in her chest, sharp as the bark against her spine, not of the wolf, but of the forbidden spark it ignited. Omegas of her line were meant to soothe the wild, to temper the storm. Yet here she was, trembling under its gaze as it dispatched the last hunter with a final guttural snarl. The body slumped, vines twitching like dying serpents, and silence fell, broken only by the wind's mournful sigh through the canopy. The wolf turned, nostrils flaring, its breath steaming in the lunar light. Those eyes, fierce gold flecked with sorrow, pinned her, stripping away the illusions of safety she'd clung to. She should run, flee this interloper who had shattered the fragile pact between their worlds, but her legs refused, rooted by an instinct older than exile. The air hummed with it, a thread of connection weaving through the fear, curious and insistent, like the first thaw after eternal ice. Then, the shift. Fur receded like mist under dawn, bones realigning with a soft, visceral pop that echoed in her ears. Before her stood a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his naked form etched with scars that mapped battles long past. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, framing a face carved from granite, high cheekbones, a jaw shadowed with stubble, lips pressed into a line of quiet resolve. At 34 winters, Darien Crow, king of the northern packs, bore the weight of his crown in every taut muscle, every haunted flicker in those amber depths. Blood streaked his chest, not his own, mingling with the sweat of exertion, and he made no move to cover himself, as if vulnerability were just another scar to wear. "You!" he growled, voice low and rough as gravel under boot. Stepping closer. The snow crunched beneath his feet, untouched by the iron's curse, as if the woods bent to his will. Fey blood calls the hunters, but it doesn't explain why they'd chase one so broken into my borders. Lyrian's heart hammered, a wild rhythm against the leaf's glow, which now seeped through her fingers like liquid sun. She pressed it to her thigh, hiding the light. But his gaze sharpened, nostrils twitching at the scent of her fear mingled with something sweeter, her fading magic. "Stay back," she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. The pull was there, instinctive, urging her to lean into his warmth, to let the alpha's presence anchor her storm-tossed spirit. But denial surged, born of betrayal's fresh wound. He was wolf, enemy by ancient decree, his kind bound to the pack's iron oaths, while hers danced in thorn and silk. Curiosity warred with terror. What madness had drawn him here, into the fray? Darian halted a pace away, his breath visible in the chill, eyes tracing the tatters of her gown, the bloodied gashes on her skin. Guilt shadowed his features, a melancholy veil over the king's unyielding strength. He was no stranger to exile's echo. His own throne sat upon a pyre of lost kin, pacts broken in wars that bled the land dry. "I am Darian Crow," he said, the name carrying the weight of howls and hearth fires. "And you bleed light, Fae, not the dark venom of your court? Why do they hunt you like prey?" She swallowed, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue. Hers, the leaf's, the slain, stirring a deeper ache. The wind whispered through the iron leaves above, carrying distant uivos from his pack, a reminder of the borders he'd crossed. Fear twisted into wary intrigue. This alpha, marked by duty's chains, had chosen intervention over indifference. Yet trust was a luxury she'd lost with her wings. "Lyrian Ashbloom," she replied, chin lifting despite the tremor in her limbs. "Exiled for refusing their games, the leaf. It holds what they crave, a seed of change they'd wield as a blade." His gaze dropped to her hand, the golden light betraying her words, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of fates entwined against the grain. He extended a hand, scarred palm up, not in demand, but offer. "The iron woods claim no sides, but I do. Come with me, or the hunter's kin will return. Your light draws more than wolves." The connection hummed, denied yet undeniable, a spark in the cold void. Lyrian hesitated, the leaf's warmth a counterpoint to the frost in her veins, curiosity edging out fear just enough to make her reach. Their fingers brushed, skin to skin, and the world narrowed to that touch, electric, forbidden, the first thread of a bond forged in blood and moonlight. But as they turned toward the shadowed path, a low rumble echoed from the depths of the woods. Not wind, but the approach of greater shadows, stirred by the king's defiance. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The rumble grew into a thunderous cadence, not of storm, but of pursuit, hooves pounding the iron-hard earth, laced with the shrill whistle of fey horns cutting through the night. Lyrian's hand tightened in Darian's grasp, the warmth of his calloused fingers a stark anchor against the chill that clawed up her spine. The metallic leaf in her other palm throbbed like a second heartbeat, its golden light seeping between her knuckles, illuminating the path ahead in fleeting, treacherous glimmers. She wanted to pull away, to sever this nascent tie before it bound her deeper into his world's snarls, but the woods offered no mercy for the solitary. The iron woods were a labyrinth of betrayal, where every shadow hid a thorn, and flight alone had led her to this precipice. Darian's amber eyes scanned the tree line, his body tensing like a bowstring drawn taut. "Run!" he commanded, voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, stirring that instinctive pull she fought to ignore. He released her hand, but stayed close, his naked form unyielding against the frost, scars glistening under the fractured moonlight, as if etched by the very blades that now hunted them both. No time for shame or explanation. The air thickened with the scent of approaching iron, fey steel, enchanted and unyielding, mingled with the acrid tang of their mounting rage. They plunged into the underbrush, branches slashing at Lyrian's tattered gown like vengeful spirits. Her bare feet bled anew on the shard-littered ground, each step a sharp reminder of her lost wings, her diminished grace. Darian moved ahead, his strides powerful and sure, parting the iron vines with sweeps of his arm that drew thin lines of blood across his skin. He was no savior by choice, she sensed. His melancholy aura spoke of a king burdened by too many oaths, his intervention a fracture in the fragile peace his packs clung to. Yet here he was, shielding her flight, his presence a wall against the encroaching howls that echoed the Fae's fury. Why? The question burned in her chest, curiosity weaving through the fear, softening its edges just enough to let empathy flicker. The hollow gave way to a ravine, its walls sheathed in crystalline ice that wept droplets like frozen tears under the moon's pale gaze. Darian veered toward a crevice, half hidden by overhanging roots, their metallic tips curling like skeletal fingers. "In here," he urged, pressing her forward into the narrow fissure. The space was a womb of stone and shadow, barely wide enough for two, the air stale with the mineral bite of earth long undisturbed. Lyrian slid inside, her back to the cold wall, the leaf's glow casting wavering patterns on Darian's face as he wedged in after her, sealing the entrance with his bulk. His breath came hot and steady against her shoulder, a counterpoint to the distant clamor now swelling outside, shouts in the lilting tongue of her kin, laced with spells that made the ground tremble. She pressed the leaf to her chest, willing its light to fade, but it pulsed defiantly, as if alive with the summer it promised. The warmth spread through her veins, a faint echo of her stolen magic, mingling with the alpha's scent, earth and pine, underscored by the faint copper of blood. In the dim confines, their bodies aligned unavoidably, her curves brushing the hard planes of his chest, sending unwelcome sparks along her skin. Denied, she told herself, this was survival, not surrender. Yet the empathy stirred, unbidden. His guilt mirrored her own rejection, two exiles forged in different fires, now huddled against a common blaze. Outside, the hunters' voices sharpened. "The Wolf King defiles our borders. By the Thorn Queen's will, his pelt will hang beside the traitor's wings." A vine lashed against the crevice's edge, probing like a serpent's tongue, and Lyrian flinched, her free hand instinctively reaching for Darian's arm. His muscles flexed under her touch, not in recoil, but in quiet resolve, his hand covering hers in a gesture that spoke of shared vigilance. The contact lingered, electric and intimate, the bond threading deeper despite her rational protests. He was no brute conqueror. His eyes, when they met hers in the half-light, held a sorrow that echoed her loss, the weight of a crown stained by choices that bled the innocent. A spell ignited beyond the stone, flames of emerald fire licking the air, their heat seeping through cracks to warm the confined space. Darian growled low, his free hand pressing against the rock face, summoning an alpha's innate strength to reinforce their barrier. Shards of ice cracked and fell, but he held, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. Lyrian's heart ached with the sight. This king, stripped of armor and throne, choosing her fragile light over his realm's fragile peace. The empathy bloomed, transforming fear into a tentative trust. She whispered a fragment of fey incantation, her voice a silken thread weaving through the stone, dulling the flame's edge just enough to buy them breath. The assault raged, vines coiling and spells shattering against their refuge, but within, silence wove its own spell. Darian's breath steadied, syncing with hers, the rise and fall of their chests, a rhythm born of necessity. Your light. It calls to something ancient, he murmured, voice roughened by exertion, his gaze tracing the golden veins on her hand. I've broken pacts before, but this, saving a fae who bleeds summer, may unravel all I've sworn to protect. Guilt shadowed his words. A king's melancholy confession, yet no regret laced them. Only duty, twisted toward compassion. Lyrian met his eyes, the leaf's glow reflecting in their amber depths like stars in a winter sea. The bond tugged, insistent now, empathy forging links she couldn't deny. Her people hunted not just her, but the equilibrium he guarded. In protecting her, he invited war upon his packs. Yet in this stone cradle, amid the storm's fury, she saw his fracture, a soul marked by loss, much like her own. And I bring ruin to your door, she replied softly, her fingers lingering on his arm, the touch a bridge over the chasm of their worlds. The wind howled outside, carrying weavos from distant ridges, his kin perhaps sensing the breach. What strength lay in mercy, when it invited such shadows? The dilemma coiled in her chest, spiritual and raw, as the flames died to embers, leaving only the echo of their shared breath in the fragile hush. But the respite was fleeting. A deeper tremor shook the ravine, the approach of greater foes, not just hunters, but the court's ironclad enforcers, drawn by the leaf's defiant shine. Darian tensed, his hand tightening over hers, the bond sealing in that moment of peril, empathy alchemized into unyielding alliance. The tremor deepened, a guttural pulse that vibrated through the stone womb, dislodging flecks of ice that rained like brittle stars onto Lyrian's upturned face. She clung to Darian's arm, the metallic leaf crushed between their palms now, its golden light seeping through their joined fingers like warm ichor from a fresh wound. The air in the crevice thickened with the scent of scorched earth and fey incantations. Emerald flames probing closer, their heat a mocking caress against the ravine's chill. Outside, the enforcers' chants rose in a dissonant chorus, thorns uncoiling from the iron roots to claw at their sanctuary, each strike echoing like a heartbeat denied. Darian's body shielded hers, his broad frame a barrier of unyielding warmth in the confined dark. His breath ghosted her temple, steady despite the strain etching lines across his brow, and in that proximity, the instinctive pull sharpened into something visceral, a tether woven from shared peril, resisting her every rational urge to sever it. He was the Alpha King, his melancholy a quiet storm she could almost taste, salted with the guilt of pacts he'd forged and fractured. Yet here, in this moment of siege, empathy had bloomed unbidden, transforming curiosity into a fragile alliance. She felt it in the subtle shift of his muscles, the way his thumb brushed her knuckles. Not demand, but quiet affirmation. What madness bound a fey exile to a wolf sovereign? The deuce's whisper, perhaps, or the leaf's defiant pulse, urging her toward revelation. A vine breached the crevice's edge, its barbed tip grazing Darian's shoulder, drawing a thin rivulet of blood that trickled warm against her skin. He snarled, low and primal, shoving it back with a surge of alpha strength that cracked the stone. But the assault intensified, spells wove through the air like spectral winds, the ground bucking as roots erupted in a tangle of iron and thorn. Lyrian's magic stirred then, faint embers in her veins flaring against the venom's lingering grip. Panic clawed at her throat, not for herself, but for him, this broken king who had chosen her light over his throne's shadowed peace. The leaf burned hotter in her grasp, its veins throbbing in rhythm with her quickening pulse, as if awakening to the peril. "No," she breathed, the word a silken invocation slipping from her lips. her free hand pressed to the leaf's surface, fingers tracing its metallic edges, and something ancient uncoiled within her, a gift long dormant, buried beneath layers of rejection and exile. The Semente du Verão Eterno was no mere relic. It was her essence, the Pathfinder's mark of her line, a power to guide realms through winter's grasp, to reveal paths where only despair tread. She'd hidden it even from herself, fearing its weight would chain her to the court's thorns. But now, under the moon's fractured gaze filtering through cracks above, it manifested. Golden light erupted from the leaf, not as a beacon of betrayal, but a radiant shield, blooming outward in tendrils of warmth that pierced the stone. The vines recoiled, shriveling like flesh kissed by true flame, their barbs melting into slag against the glow. Emerald spells shattered against the barrier, fizzling into harmless sparks that danced like fireflies in the sudden bloom. Lyrian gasped, her body arching as the power surged through her, visions flashing in her mind's eye. Sun-drenched groves piercing eternal snows, wolves and fae standing unbowed under a balanced sky. Destinies realigned not by force, but by choice. The leaf bled its light freely now, veins pulsing with ethereal gold that illuminated the crevice in hues of dawn, casting Darian's scarred form in relief, his amber eyes widening in awe. He stared, transfixed, as the light washed over him, seeping into his wounds like balm. The guilt that shadowed his features cracked, revelation dawning in the depths of his gaze. This was no ordinary fey trinket. He felt it in his bones, a key to the curse that had haunted his reign. The winter's bind. An ancient malediction from broken pacts that froze his pack's lands in perpetual blight, claiming lives with every merciless season. His kin's howls echoed distantly, a chorus of suffering he'd borne alone, rationalizing isolation as duty. But her light. It promised thaw, a path to redemption through union, not conquest. She was the Pathfinder, the Omega whose gift could unravel the chains of his past, forging a new equilibrium where wolf and fae might stand as allies, not enemies. Destiny, not as iron decree, but as revelation under the moon, her light bleeding into his shadowed soul, demanding he choose compassion over the power that had cost him so much. Lyrian, he murmured, voice roughened by wonder, his hand tightening over hers as the glow enveloped them both. The bond thrummed now, undeniable, her power resonating with his alpha essence in a symphony of fire and frost. Yet denial flickered in her eyes, the romantic tragedy of it all, a tenderness born in the crucible of war, resisted by the scars of betrayal. She was no willing key, her gift had been her exile's secret, a burden she'd meant to bury. This light, it's the end of my winter. You've carried the seed that could save us all. But at what cost to you? The enforcers' chants faltered outside, their assault crumbling as the golden aura expanded, thawing the ravine's ice into rivulets that whispered of summer's promise. Lyrian trembled, the manifestation draining her, Venom's remnants clawing back with icy fingers. Empathy warred with fear in her chest. His realization bound them deeper, yet it invited greater shadows. The court's wrath, his pack's suspicion, a war rekindled by this forbidden light. What was strength, if not choosing to wield such power for mercy when it could redefine their worlds? The dilemma coiled, spiritual and raw, as the leaf's glow dimmed to a steady ember, leaving them in hushed afterlight, breaths mingling like oaths unspoken. But the woods stirred anew, distant horns blaring a retreat laced with venomous promise. The revelation hung between them, a bridge or a blade, as Darian's gaze held hers, melancholy yielding to resolve, the alpha seeing in her not prey, but the heart of his destiny's fire. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the ravine's hush shattered like fragile ice under the weight of approaching thunder. Not storm, but the thunder of paws and iron-shod hooves converging on the ironwood's heart. Lyrian's pulse raced in tandem with the leaf's fading ember, its golden light now a subtle vein tracing her palm, a reminder of the revelation that had bound her to Darien in ways she could neither deny nor embrace. The warmth of his body lingered against hers as they emerged from the crevice, the air sharp with the scent of scorched vines and distant smoke, but the respite was illusion. Her gift had repelled the enforcers, yet it had also ignited a beacon far brighter than any hunter's arrow, a call to the shadows of her past and his. Darien's hand found hers again, a steady anchor amid the chaos, his amber eyes scanning the tree line where silhouettes gathered like specters under the moon's fractured gaze. "They come," he murmured, voice laced with the melancholy resolve of a king who knew the cost of every choice. His pack's howls rose in answer, a chorus of loyalty edged with suspicion, mingling with the shrill fey horns that pierced the night like thorns through flesh. The bond between them thrummed, insistent and raw, pulling at her core with an empathy she resisted. This alpha, marked by guilt's heavy crown, had seen her light as salvation, yet now it dragged them both into judgment's maw. They crested the ravine's lip, the metallic leaf pulsing hotter in her grip, bleeding faint golden droplets that sizzled against the frost-laced earth. The woods opened to a clearing ringed by iron trees, their bark glinting like upraised blades under the lunar sheen. Snowdrifts swirling in eddies stirred by the wind's mournful wail. There the confrontation unfolded. Darien's pack emerged from the northern shadows, wolves shifting to men and women clad in furs and steel, their eyes glowing with feral wariness. At their forefront stood Thorn Blackfang, Darien's beta and once-sworn brother, his face a mask of betrayal's scar, a rival alpha in all but name, whose ambition had simmered since the winter's bind claimed their queen years ago. "You reek of fey sorcery, my king," Thorn snarled, his voice a guttural challenge, claws extending from furred hands. "You've broken the blood oath for this? Light thief? The packs will not kneel to your folly." Lyrian's breath caught, the cold wind whipping her auburn strands across her face, carrying the metallic tang of impending blood. Her past mirrored in the pack's distrust, the court of eternal thorns, where her sister's blade had severed more than wings, severing her from kin who saw her refusal as treason. Now the Fey enforcers crested the opposite ridge, led by her own blood, Elowen Ashbloom, her elder sister, resplendent in thorn-woven armor that gleamed blue-black under the moon, eyes like polished obsidian fixed on the leaf's glow. "Sister," Elowen called, her voice silken venom, vines uncoiling from her gauntlets like living serpents. "You flee with the Wolf King, clutching the seed that could crown our court eternal. Return it, and perhaps the Dusa spares your shame, or watch as we raze these mongrels' borders." The air thickened with tension, weavos clashing against fey chants, the ground trembling as roots and paws churned the snow into crimson slush from minor skirmishes at the edges. Darien stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyrian and the fray, his naked form unbowed despite the chill. Scars a map of battles that echoed her own losses. Guilt shadowed his features, deeper now. The packs he led suffered under the eternal winter he'd failed to lift, and Thorn's challenge was no surprise. The beta had whispered of purges, of cleansing the old packs to forge power untainted by fey whispers. "Thorn," Darien growled, his alpha command rippling through the air like thunder. "This fey bears the key to our thaw. The winter's bind ends not in war, but in alliance. Stand down, or face me as traitor." Lyrian's heart twisted, the leaf's light flaring in response to her turmoil, casting golden reflections on the iron blades encircling them. Empathy warred with the instinct to flee. Darien's choice mirrored her exile's pain, a king confronting his fractured kin for a light he barely understood, yet believed in with a faith that bordered on spiritual fire. But freedom beckoned, sharp as the wind's bite. She could shatter the leaf here, deny both courts its power, vanish into the wood's embrace and leave him to his war. Love, or what simmered in their bond, was no reward. It was a chain, demanding she choose between her liberty and his redemption. What was strength, if not forgiving the betrayers who had carved her hollow, or igniting war to claim compassion's fragile crown? Eloin's vines lashed out, coiling toward Lyrian with predatory grace, but Darien intercepted, claws raking through them in a spray of sap and blood. Thorn lunged then, shifting mid-stride into wolf form, jaws snapping at Darien's flank in a betrayal long brewed. The beta's eyes burned with the hunger of a rival, visions of his own throne dancing in their depths. The king twisted, meeting the assault with a roar that shook the trees, the two alphas tumbling into the snow in a whirlwind of fur and fang, blood steaming on the white expanse. Lyrian cried out, the sound raw and unbidden, her hand extending as golden light surged from the leaf, not as shield, but as thread, weaving between the combatants to dull their fury, visions of balanced realms flashing in their minds, summer's bloom piercing winter's veil, fay and wolf bound not by oath, but by mercy's quiet fire. The light held them suspended, breaths heaving, the wind falling silent as if the moon itself witnessed the moral precipice. Alawan faltered, obsidian eyes widening at the seed's promise. Power not for domination, but harmony, a revelation that cracked her court's unyielding thorns. Thorn shifted back, chest heaving, his challenge crumbling under the weight of what he'd glimpsed, a pack unchained from curse, not by his ruthless rule, but by forgiveness extended to the other. Darien rose, bloodied but unbroken, his gaze finding Lyrian's across the clearing. Melancholy yielding to a profound ache, the bond of visceral pull that demanded her choice. Yet doubt coiled in her chest, spiritual and searing. Pardon her sister's blade, Thorn's fangs, and embrace this love as redemption, or shatter it all for the solitude of forgotten paths. The leaf bled brighter, its golden ichor pooling at her feet like an offering, the dilemma etching deeper as distant weavos and chants hushed, waiting for her word to crown war or weave peace. In that suspended breath, under the moon's unblinking eye, Lyrian felt the Deuce's threads tighten. Destiny versus freedom. A choice that could rebirth worlds or leave them in eternal frost. The golden light from the metallic leaf wove through the clearing like threads of forgotten dawn, holding the fray in a fragile stasis. Breaths suspended amid the churned snow and steaming blood. Lyrian stood at the heart of it, her bare feet rooted in the crimson slush, the leaf's veins pulsing against her palm as if it drank from her very resolve. The wind had stilled, leaving only the distant weavos of the packs and the faint rustle of iron leaves overhead, their edges glinting like silent witnesses under the moon's fractured gaze. Eloin's vines hung limp, obsidian eyes locked on the glow with a hunger cracked by doubt. Thorn knelt in the snow, his beta's form heaving, the rival fire in his gaze dimmed by visions of a thawed realm where his ambition found no purchase. And Darien, bloodied, unbowed, rose slowly, his amber eyes finding hers across the divide, a king's melancholy etched deeper by the weight of what her light had unveiled. The bond thrummed in her chest, visceral and unrelenting, pulling at the frayed edges of her fey soul with an empathy she could no longer rationalize away. This alpha, scarred by duties that had cost him kin and peace, had chosen her exile over his throne's isolation, his guilt a mirror to her rejection's hollow ache. Yet the choice loomed now, sharp as the iron bark encircling them, demanding she wield the semente do verão eterno, not as weapon or secret, but as bridge, or shatter it to reclaim her solitary freedom. Faith against despair, to trust in this tenderness born of peril, or let the leaf's light fade into the eternal frost, denying both courts the harmony it promised. What was redemption, if not sacrificing the self for a love that cured without conquest. Lyrian. Darian's voice cut through the hush, roughened by blood and resolve, his hand extended once more, palm scarred and open. Snowflakes caught in his dark hair, melting against the heat of his skin. And in that gesture, she saw the fracture of his world, packs divided, packs unraveled, all for the fey light that could lift the winter's bind from his lands. His guilt flickered, not as weakness, but as the ethical core of his reign. A king who had rationalized isolation to spare further loss, now offering union as the path to rebirth. The air between them hummed with it, the leaf's golden ichor dripping warm onto the ground, thawing the earth in small, defiant blooms where iron roots had choked life. Aloan stirred first, her thorn armor creaking as she stepped forward, the blue-black gleam catching lunar reflections like spilled ink. "Sister, the seed was never yours to hoard," she hissed, voice a silken blade laced with the court's unyielding philosophy. "Power as dominion, compassion as folly. Yield it and reclaim your place. This wolf king's mercy is a lie. His kind devours what they cannot bind." Her eyes, so like their mother's, held no forgiveness. Only the echo of the blade that had severed Lyrian's wings, a betrayal born of hierarchy's cold calculus. The enforcers behind her shifted, vines twitching with restrained fury, their chants a low undercurrent threatening to shatter the light's fragile hold. Thorn rose then, wiping blood from his muzzle, his gaze sliding from Darian to Lyrian with the wariness of a rival sensing shift. "The packs followed you through blizzards, my king," he growled, voice thick with the pain of glimpsed salvation and the fear of yielding his claim. "But this fey sorcery, it reeks of chains renewed. If you bind us to her light, what becomes of our freedom? War with the thorns, or subjugation under summer's false thaw?" His words struck deep, mirroring Lyrian's own turmoil. The beta's ambition was no different from the court's games, a moral precipice where power tempted over mercy. The pack murmured, eyes glowing in the half-light, loyalty frayed by the king's choice, weevils rising like questions unanswered. Lyrian's breath came shallow, the cold seeping through her tattered gown, raising gooseflesh on her pale skin as the leaf burned hotter, its light bleeding into her veins like liquid fire. Introspection coiled within her, slow and searing. She had fled to escape being currency, her omega essence twisted into tool for alliances that bled the innocent. Now the Pathfinder's gift demanded she choose. Infuse the seed into the earth here, curing the winter's curse through union with Darian's packs, birthing a realm where Fae and Wolf coexisted in balanced rebirth. Or crush it, letting the golden light spill uselessly, sacrificing potential harmony for her liberty, leaving him to the despair of unbroken frost. The romantic tragedy of it twisted her heart. Love as proof, not prize, a tenderness forged in blood and moonlight, resisted until this moment's edge. His eyes held hers, amber depths reflecting her doubt, and in that gaze she felt the spiritual pull of the Deusa, destiny as revelation, not decree, urging faith in compassion's quiet strength. A vine lashed out from Elowen's gauntlet, testing the light's boundary. But Lyrian extended her free hand, the glow surging in response, a radiant wave that enveloped the clearing, visions blooming anew. Ironwoods greening under summer's touch, wolves loping through thornless glades, fey wings unfurling in winds free of exile's bite. The enforcers recoiled, spells fizzling on their lips, thorns pack stilled, the howls fading to awed silence. Darian closed the distance, his fingers brushing hers, the contact electric, sealing the bond in a rush of warmth that chased the venom's remnants from her blood. "Choose with me," he whispered, voice a low thunder against the wind's reawakening sigh. "Not as queen or pawn, but as the light that redeems what guilt has broken. Your sacrifice, it cures us both." Tears traced hot paths down her cheeks, mingling with the leaf's ichor, the dilemma ethical and raw. Forgive the betrayers, unite the fractured, or embrace the despair of solitude. The moon watched, unblinking, as she lifted the leaf high, its veins flaring like a dying star, the choice hovering on her lips, union's rebirth or freedom's final severance. The ground trembled faintly, roots stirring beneath the snow, as if the earth itself awaited her word, the air thick with the scent of impending thaw and the metallic tang of blood yet to spill. In that suspended breath, Lyrian felt the Renascimento stir, a phoenix's whisper in her soul, but the shadows of doubt lingered, demanding one last trial before the light could fully crown. The wind howled anew, carrying echoes of distant horns and paws. The fragile peace teetering as Eloin's resolve hardened and Thorn's hand twitched toward his blade. Lyrian's heart hammered, the leaf's glow a beacon in her grasp, illuminating the path to sacrifice, or the abyss of what might have been. The leaf's golden light trembled in Lyrian's grasp, its metallic veins bleeding rivulets of warmth that traced her fingers like tears of molten sun, pooling in the crimson slush at her feet. The clearing held its breath, iron trees standing sentinel in their blade-sharp vigil, the fractured moon casting prismatic shards across the snow where blood and thaw mingled in defiant harmony. Eloin's obsidian eyes narrowed, her thorn armor creaking as vines stirred anew, coiling like serpents scenting weakness. Thorn's claws glinted, his beta's frame taut with the hunger of unresolved challenge, the pack's murmurs rising like a gathering storm. And Darien, his amber gaze locked on hers, unyielding yet laced with the melancholy of a king who had bartered his solitude for this precipice, stood as the axis of her world, his extended hand a silent vow etched in scars and frost-kissed skin. The wind's howl deepened, whipping flurries that stung her cheeks, carrying the metallic tang of iron and the earthy musk of furred bodies pressing closer. Lyrian's chest ached, a visceral knot of faith and despair twisting beneath her ribs, the leaf's pulse sinking with her faltering heartbeat. Introspection flooded her, slow and inexorable as the encroaching night. She had been forged in rejection's fire, wings severed not just by blade, but by the court's unfeeling calculus, her omega essence reduced to barter until she fled into exile's embrace. The Semente do Verão Eterno had been her secret rebellion, a pathfinder's gift meant to guide lost realms, yet it had chained her to this moment, demanding she choose between the solitude of shattered light and the union that could rebirth them all. Love was no gentle crown. It was the proof of survival, a redemption carved from sacrifice, tender in its tragedy as moonlight on fresh wounds. Eloin's voice sliced through the tension, silken and sharp as a thorn's kiss. Foolish sister, the Deusa demands balance through strength, not this wolf-tainted mercy. Yield the seed, or watch your light consume you both. Her vines lashed forward, probing the golden barrier with insidious grace, their barbs drawing faint sparks from the glow. The enforcers advanced, chance weaving a web of emerald malice that clawed at the air, threatening to unravel the visions Lyrian had woven. Summer groves blooming amid eternal snows, fae and wolf entwined in paths unmarred by ancient hate. Thorn snarled, lunging a step toward Darien, his eyes flickering with the despair of a rival glimpsing his own obsolescence. "You've led us to ruin, King. This phase thaw is a siren's call, power for her thorns, chains for our packs." The beta's pack echoed him, Weavos rising in a cacophony that vibrated through the ground, paws churning snow into froth, their loyalty fracturing like ice under pressure. Darien's frame tensed, his free hand curling into a fist, blood from earlier wounds seeping anew, staining the white expanse red. Guilt shadowed his features, profound and ethical, a sovereign who had rationalized isolation to shield his kin from further loss, now confronting the moral abyss where compassion invited war. Yet he did not retreat. His presence was a bulwark, the alpha's essence radiating quiet resolve, pulling at Lyrian's core with an insistent bond that defied her lingering denial. The leaf burned hotter, its light surging through her veins like liquid fire, chasing the venom's icy remnants and igniting visions sharper than before. Darian's pax freed from winter's bind, her court's thorns softened by summer's grace. A realm reborn, not through conquest, but through the mercy of entwined fates. The power drained her, knees buckling in the slush, but she held firm, the glow expanding to envelop the clearing in a dome of ethereal gold. Vines withered at its touch, enforcers staggering back with cries that echoed her own past screams. Thorn halted mid-stride, his claws retracting as the light pierced his doubt, revealing a future where his ambition yielded to shared strength. The wind fell silent, leaving only the soft patter of melting snow and the distant fading horns of retreat. Lyrian met Darian's gaze, tears carving hot paths down her face, mingling with the leaf's ichor. The romantic pull was undeniable now, a tenderness born in the crucible of blood and frost, resisted no longer by the walls of exile. He was broken as she, marked by guilt's heavy yoke, his ethical heart a mirror to her spiritual ache. Faith surged against despair, the Deusa's threads tightening like a lover's embrace. Destiny was no iron decree, but a revelation demanding choice. Power or compassion? She chose the latter, lifting the leaf high, its veins flaring in a final radiant bloom. "For the light we both carry," she whispered, voice steady amid the tremor in her soul, "not as chains, but as cure." With a breath that tasted of pine and promise, she crushed the leaf against her palm, golden light exploding outward in a cascade of warmth that pierced the eternal frost. The ground shuddered, iron roots twisting upward in verdant spirals, snow dissolving into rivulets that fed hidden springs long choked by winter's curse. Alawan gasped, her armor cracking as thorns bloomed into fragile flowers, the court's unyielding philosophy fracturing under the seed's release, a harmony that forgave without forgetting, binding realms in quiet union. Thorn bowed his head, the rival's fire quenched by the vision of Pax thriving under balanced skies, his betrayal transmuted into reluctant allegiance. The enforcers knelt, obsidian eyes softening to starlit wonder, the chants dissolving into murmurs of awe. Darian closed the distance, his arms enveloping her as the light faded to embers, his warmth a hearth against the lingering chill. The bond sealed in that embrace, visceral and redemptive, their heartbeats sinking like weavos under the moon. Wounds knit in the glow's afterimage, hers from venom and blade, his from guilt and fang, birthing a rebirth profound and shared. No sacrifice without cost. Shadows of old wars lingered in the wood's depths, but the eternal winter broke, summer's whisper threading through the iron veins of the land. Lyrian leaned into him, the tragedy yielding to tenderness, her wings' loss a scar now etched with purpose, his crown lightened by mercy's crown. The moon watched, whole at last in the clearing sky, as distant howls and fey songs wove into a single, harmonious call. A realm redefined, exiles reborn in the fire of chosen love. The wind sighed, carrying petals of gold on its breath, the iron woods greening under their feet, a testament to compassion's quiet sovereignty. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.